Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you are listening to Watch This List Unplugged, the Hidden Gems series officially. Today, I have my friend Andrew Draper, whom I have been connected to on Letterboxd for longer than I can remember. Not entirely sure how I found you, Andrew, actually. If you were
Mm,
connected to any of my current mutuals. But hello, and I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks. Very glad to be here.
Do you remember at all how we connected? Not
No,
that,
I mean,
anyone.
Mosquito Dragon. I've been because he has the horror thing. So I feel like I've been reading a lot
Rob.
of his reviews. Yeah, really Robert's reviews for a while. So it could have
Hmm.
been through that.
Yeah, I just remember that when I was doing the Decalogue series in particular, I noticed your reviews, but I think I had been following you prior
Mm.
to that because that was like recent that I did that the month of December. But that's what really struck me because you had reviewed most of them too, and you have a similar viewpoint. I feel like as I do.
Yeah, I mean that's what the Decalogue is like, right? It's like a tuning fork, and you hit it, and then you get these resonating frequencies back, and it really tells you something because they really don't tell you how to feel. Like it's like they're so aggressive in that sense. Like you are not told how to feel by those movies. So when someone responds to it, you're like, okay, I really feel like I got something about that person in their response.
Especially when uh they do it one by one because some people will do, which I don't understand this, but some people will do an overall Decalogue summation, which to me is insane. I I think those
I
are
saw
the
the
crazy
first
people who
one and I was
marathon
like,
it.
whoa. Maybe I'll come back
Yes.
to this in a month. Kind of like I wasn't ready to like jump into another one.
Oh yeah, and I feel like it should be digested slowly over time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be like 1 or 2 a week max and then thoughtful analysis per. If nobody knows what this is I should sell this because this is a hidden gem
Yeah, yeah.
among non-cinephiles, but this is a um a 10-part, what would you call it? It's not really a TV series exactly. Uh but it's 10 films that are dedicated to, loosely based on the 10 Commandments, um, by Kieslowski, who is a Polish director. And it's extremely introspective. And anytime, I think Andrew had referred to me doing this as a pilgrimage. So it's a very, like a cinematic journey,
Mm,
almost like an initiation,
yeah.
I would say, into having your cinephile card. So that's what I really sticks out with Andrew. But you do all kinds of movies, really, don't you?
Sure, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. But it
you don't
was
have
it
like
was
a
horror
genre.
movies that got me into Letterboxd in a big way.
Okay, so you would say that is that the most of what you watch is horror
It's
overall?
just I just feel like I connected to Letterboxd and I reconnected to horror films, and they were related processes. Um,
Oh, yeah.
somehow, yeah.
What are your favorites? Just to name some.
Well, the movies that really got me jazzed with talking about horror.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, what I mean, I anyway, that's an impossible question, but I can answer this question, which is, I, I had a period. I mean, I think I've told you I've had a period of being very involved with evangelical Christianity, and as part
Mm-hmm.
of that, I had this sense that like my sort of trashy teen tastes in like horror and science fiction somehow I was trying to like put away childish things, or I had some kind of wackiness going on because but I literally sort of lost my taste for horror overnight, and it coincided with a time when horror wasn't really like in ascendancy. It was sort
Mm-hmm.
of like, the 80s were a really rich time, the 90s and the aughts, a little less so. So but then I went through all kinds of changes and so forth, but hadn't really reconnected with the genre. And then there was this 1 year period where The Babadook and It Follows came out, and I was like,
Yes.
there is stuff happening. I don't. This is exciting stuff. And I caught I caught the bug again, and I got back into it in a big way.
So would you say that the horror that you watch now and enjoy, is it more recent entries like that, or is it that it kind of catapulted you into the past.
The whole thing, right?
The
The whole
whole
yeah, the
thing.
whole thing. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I love The Babadook, and I loved It Follows.
Yeah.
David Robert Mitchell, right?
Yeah.
He's fantastic. And Jennifer Kent, I want to say,
Yeah.
did The Babadook. She also did The Nightingale. I won't get into it.
Haven't seen it, but I'm
Okay.
intimidated for sure.
That's one of those where you will either give it 5 stars or 0 stars, I'm going to say. That's rough. And then David Robert Mitchell, that's it. That is his name, right? I want to say that's his name. Yes. David Robert Mitchell also made a movie called The Myth of the American Sleepover,
Yeah.
which I loved
I haven't seen that.
too.
I've got to see it. Yeah.
Andrew, I'm giving you free hidden gems right now,
You really are.
as
Where's
well as the rest of you.
that's my I got my water, but I have my pen, you know.
You need your pen and a piece of paper. Yes, so my friend Andrew Draper, I am pleased that you want to be on this. I never know when if somebody is going to be susceptible and be like, "No, Amy, I do not want to be on your crazy podcast." And Andrew had such a warm response that I was relieved for.
Let me
So
repeat my response. I thought of that bit in Rushmore where where he gives the kid the script and he's like, I want you to be in my movie. And the bully, you know, who's been tormenting him through the whole film, and he's like, always wanted to be in one of your fucking movies. That's
that was Andrew's
right.
reaction. An honor. Yeah, and that kid was like Irish, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Of course, Wes Anderson has like it's not just a bully for Max Fisher, it's an Irish bully.
yeah.
That's total Anderson. Okay, so the movies that Andrew picked here are not really related at all thematically, but they are both based on books, and so they have a very, very literary feel. We're going to start with a movie that came out. Well, both of them are '90s, but one is at the beginning of the '90s. The other one is at the
Indeed.
end.
Yeah.
This one is at the end '99, called Jesus' Son. Directed. It's female director Allison McLean. Um, Andrew, if you had to describe this movie to someone who had never seen it, what would you say?
Oh, well, I would say that,
Stumping you.
yeah, I would say I think part of what makes this hidden, the hidden part of the hidden gem part, is that it is hard to type the movie. Um, I think if you compare it to something like
Hmm.
Drugstore Cowboy, could be a little misleading. I think to sort of just say, oh, it's just an episodic slice of life is also kind of misleading. Um, I would I would try to. This is not really very good. I guess I would really. This is a movie where I would couch the pitch to the person. Like I would not have a generic blurb for this movie. Like if I would have
Okay.
I would have to be talking to a particular person, and knowing them and what their perspective on movies, their perspective on life, I would craft some particular way of describing this movie that'd probably be different for like every single person. I mean, even if you try to say, "Oh, it's based on this book," well, then great. What do you say about this book? Because it's not exactly a novel. It's not exactly a collection of short stories. And
Mm.
that's what the movie is like too. It's like interlinked vignettes, and that's all right. I guess there was a period where we had a lot of movies like that, like Babel and Crash, the bad Crash that won the Oscar was sort of you know what I mean, like these kind of interlinked
Yes.
narratives. But and that isn't really fair either because Jesus' Son does have a main character, but then if you want to talk about the main character, they didn't give you a name for him. They didn't give you a proper handle for him. You just have to call him Fuckhead, which immediately tells
FH.
you, yeah, FH, which immediately tells you you're dealing with something strange here in this movie. And again, like how do you know what to expect when FH is the main character?
I would almost say just so you know, because Andrew and I have not discussed this at all since I've seen it, but one of the terms that frequently came up when I was reading about it was junkie odyssey.
Mm,
So, I would say that this is like you're looking it seems diminutive in a way, to just reduce it down to that, but it is showing like the life of an addict, sort of, and then stumbling onto it's kind of feels like a road trip movie in a way because there's so many supporting characters. So he's kind of going from one place to the next. You see different actors that you know. You could really sell this movie based on the cast alone if you really
Oh yeah.
wanted to. I feel like. So tell us. Well, yeah. Tell me what your impression is of Crudup as the lead, and then who else you see. I'm sure you love him.
I
I can
do.
feel it.
I mean, what I love about Crudup is he's one of these guys. He's one of these guys that has movie star looks, and somehow
Yes.
has never, whether intentionally or unintentionally, has never capitalized them in that way. He never had the Johnny Depp. Oh, let's get somebody pretty, so we're gonna get him. Like
Mhm.
somehow that never seemed to happen to Crudup. Maybe Almost Famous was sort of like we want this guy to be pretty, and that's important to like how he is in the movie. With Jesus' Son, he does this sort of pivot where his prettiness is unsettling because there's a sense that like as pleasing as his features are, the expressions he's making and the kinds of moves and the way he moves in the world is just kind of you're really not sure what to make of him, and there's an interesting tension there. And
That is
yeah,
very reminiscent of, like, After Dark, My Sweet with Jason Patric. I just have to say
right,
that
right,
because he's so pretty and he's real I mean, he's very good looking, but then his character is so eccentric that you
totally.
don't n yeah, you don't know how to mesh the 2. Sorry to interrupt, but
No,
that
I saw Jason
immediately
Patrick in
made
The
me think
Lost Boys and never remembered him again after that. And then I saw After Dark, My Sweet
right.
and was like, who is that? It's that kind of
Who is
thing.
this
Yeah,
guy?
yeah,
And he sort of transcends his own hotness. He goes beyond his physical appearance to something else, and I
yeah,
think Billy is absolutely doing that in this film.
yeah, yeah.
He's trying to shed that.
One of my we can quote other people, right? One of my favorite lines
Oh,
is
sure.
Mike D'Angelo on Crudup's performance. He says it's like a nonstop embodiment of the yes and improvisational technique. FH responds to every situation with initial befuddlement followed by total embrace. I just thought that was
Yes,
so good. It's, such a great such a great line. I think one of the main entertainment values in this movie is first of all the series of strange situations, and then watching Crudup respond to the things that come his way. Um, yeah, like the sequence of expressions on his face is like it's like an action sequence, like just like the things happening in the course of a single shot.
and how you're like you're saying, he goes from, "What the heck is going on?" to, "Okay." Like, just complete acceptance of the current situation he's in. It is now, Andrew, have you read this book?
Yeah.
I'm assuming since you showed it. What are the differences there, and how do you feel about each?
Well, I think because we're talking about Crudup and FH, um, the most important one is that they they softened FH for the movie. He's a bit scary. It's very clear in some of the stories in the book that there was a Christian reviewer who wrote about the movie, and this is the way they put it. Victoria Emily Jones. She said she points out, he's violent towards women in certain scenes. He fantasizes about rape at one point. He,
Mm,
the abortion scene, which is really very strong, one of the stronger scenes in the movie, and he is somewhat alienating and troubling. I mean, he's alienated in that scene, but in the story, it's a little stronger. His the sense that he's sort of pushing her away is stronger. So
mm.
there definitely was some thought put into. We know this movie is going to be strange, and it's not going to sort of fit into the mainstream. But there's a limit to how far we want to go. Like,
And how much you wanna alienate the audience
yeah,
with
yeah,
his kind of anti-hero-ness.
yeah.
Okay. So there's they kind of softened him up
I think that's
in the
that's
film.
that's fair to say, and that has to do with Crudup's performance too. is he inhabits many, many modes, but he never, like the scene where she the three dudes pull up and she's like, he punched me in the stomach. Like the way that scene is portrayed, it's like, did he punch her in the stomach? Like they had some kind of sort of a tussle, but it wasn't really portrayed in the book. It's like he did punch her in the stomach.
Okay. So
Like
so they
these
want us to empathize with him a little bit
right.
more.
And but then also Crudup, like the way he plays it, like he's a million miles from someone who's like, I want to punch this girl in the stomach now. Like,
Right.
but in the book, it's clear that the range of his impulse, he's a very impulsive person. And he's impulsive in the movie too, but the range of his impulses includes a broader range and a more disturbing range.
Now, why do you think that since this has it's got Billy Crudup as the main character, Samantha Morton is the love interest, but it also has like Will Patton, Michael Shannon, um, who am I forgetting here?
Yeah.
Every place he goes to, there's like famous
Did you see Miranda
actors.
July?
I did see Miranda July with with the big pill. Yes. Uh, so Dennis Leary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, an odyssey, just going from one place to the next. But why do you think that more people have not heard of it?
Well,
Why is it underseen when it's got, a fairly stacked cast? I would
it
say,
just has
at
an
least of indie
amazingly stacked
actors.
cast,
Yeah.
and I think that it's a bit of a it's a slippery movie. I think it's like Kieslowski and the Decalogue. It's inviting you into a participatory experience, and that's very that's very difficult. It's very chancy. Um, the production of the movie was super difficult, uh,
Hmm.
and one of the things that was happening was Allison McLean was discussing how she was working with people who had never made a movie before, and that when they did screenings of rough cuts, it was brutal because they didn't have the voiceover, they didn't have music, things weren't really shaped. Like where this movie comes together is not in anything remotely like a set piece. It comes together in very carefully calibrated rhythms, and the music's a big part of that, and the voiceover is a big part of that. So basically, it's like the reach when they saw the rough cut was like they could not understand how the movie could possibly work. Like the producers were there, like, she said pale, still faces after a screening. She said it would take me 3 days to recover, and then I had a few days to get ready for the next rough cut screening. So I feel like there's still some of that in the end result. Like the movie isn't always telling you how to feel. It doesn't telegraph where it's headed, and even when like there's magical realist touches where, are you ready for this? I hope you are. And there's the guy's heart coming out of his chest or a hand passing through a window. Like just it's I think that is, you could come out of that movie, have enjoyed it, but not know how to discuss it with other people.
That's a good way to put it. I also was just thinking when you said "Hard Out," I forgot Jack Black and Holly Hunter. So there are so many people in this movie, and it feels sort of like the Sam Mendes movie "Away We Go," where they're going from different place to place as well. So anybody who would like something where it's like sort of a travel film or like a hangout film, I think would like this. But you're right; it is kind of emotionally inaccessible in a sense because you have to be willing to empathize with difficult characters.
I mean, that's the beauty of Credit's performance. I think is he is capable of being adorable, but you also get the sense you're dealing with someone quite alien from your normal walks of life. So I feel like I'm going to emphasize the gem part now. I mean, I feel like when you give the movie a chance, Crudup is an amazing protagonist. It is rare to be invited to follow along with someone for whom life is this kind of odyssey. Um, a lot of people come with sort of, destinations stapled to their foreheads in movies, particularly, and that's not what it's like for FH. And the same thing with Michelle and Samantha Morton's performance that's someone who can turn on a dime, someone who has an expressiveness and a spontaneity that's really like whoa, but also
Electric.
yeah, yeah, really great performance. So I think these things are really can be really pleasurable and also provocative experiences in a movie. But I I get in a sense why it never really took off because it's it's also willing to be somewhat alienating. Let me try and think about a scene that kind of captures that. I mean, if you think about the hospital scene with Jack
Yes.
Black, like that's a beautiful example of the duality of this movie because Jack Black is doing Jack Black. He's hilarious. It's wonderful to see him in that context. And in some ways it's a very it's a surreal and very engaging and comical scene. I mean, it's giving us stuff that's like immediately relatable. On the other hand, we don't want to think about we don't want to think about a hospital as a place where FH is an orderly and in which
Correct.
the
Correct.
guy from Ally McBeal is there like we need an eye guy, we need the best eye guy, and
We need a brain surgeon.
clearly
Can you get that to me stat? Because I don't want to touch this guy.
clearly out of his
Right.
depth. And there's and FH and Jack Black's kid Georgie are on on their pills, and they're like, who knows what this does? Let's see.
Speed.
It's
Hmm.
the whole thing is it's peeling back. It's like peeling back a layer and showing us stuff that we prefer to pretend isn't there. And I guess and that's what FH is too. FH is a person with that layer peeled back so that you're constantly seeing his feelings on his face and realizing that like from one moment to the next he doesn't know what's going to happen. That
Right.
he meets Michelle and he has this makeout moment, and then her boyfriend shows up, and when the boyfriend dubs him, FH, he gets bestowed with the name, and his that's another crud up moment where his face is like it's not exactly like a cringing dog, like someone waiting to be beaten. It's not quite that, but the only reason it's not like that is because he really doesn't know what to expect. Like he isn't literally expecting a beating, but he has a kind of like he's ready to cringe, but he's not yet cringing. He really has no idea what's coming next. And we're sort of invited it's like a person with that layer of protection like stripped away.
And it's a person who lives completely in the present moment at all times. When he goes up to his car at the beginning and there's a guy sleeping in the back of his car, he's like, "What do I do in this situation?" And
Yeah.
you're like, "Well, yeah, I don't know." And everything feels just incredibly immediate when he first sees Michelle. Everything is like real-time analysis. This guy is not thinking ahead. He doesn't regret anything. It's just all right now the whole film. And you're kind of like invited to try to make sense of the world as if you were him through
Yeah.
his eyes.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think the Odyssey part is apt because we're along with him and trying to decipher things according to his perspective. So,
Yeah.
Jesus' son, check it out. I think Andrew is right that it is compelling, and if nothing else, it will just make you be like, oh, there's that guy, there's this guy, there's that actor I
The
like,
cast is,
which is
is
always fun.
stacked. It
It's
got an
wonderful.
award at the Venice Film Festival called the Ecumenical Award, which was sponsored by the Catholic
Mm.
Church, and the writer producer was astounded. She was very surprised that the Catholics liked the movie so much. She went up to the priest and said, "Why did you give us this award?" And he looked at her with this sort of like, "That's was such a funny question. How could it not be evident to you?" And he said, "It's a story of what it's like to be a human being."
Hmm.
It's not easy to sell, but I think it's a great experience. Like the movie really takes you on a ride.
Yeah, and any film called Jesus' Son, just that title to me is intriguing because you're like, hold on a second.
Right. In the book, it's explained, and in the movie, they don't even bother. They don't even bother
I,
trying to tell you.
I d- I have no idea what it means. I don't know if that's a spoiler for you to
No,
explain
not at
it,
all.
but
It's the epigraph. The
okay,
epigraph of the novel is from a Lou Reed song, the song "Heroin." He says, "When I'm rushing on my
okay.
run and I feel just like Jesus' son."
Hmm.
So that's the first page of the book that tells you this is going to be about heroin addiction, among other things.
Right. Okay. Very good. Very good, Andrew. I wreck this one too. Okay, so now your second one, which is a completely different segue vibe, is the Russia House,
Yeah.
which is from 1990, directed by Fred Schlepisi. I'm gonna
Skepsy.
say
Skepsy.
Skepsi. Wow, should have asked before, and based on a novel which you've also read by
John Le Carre. Yeah.
Le Carre.
I
Butchered
think.
both.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Okay,
we're guessing.
and you've got that copy. You have to show it,
Oh,
Andrew.
yeah. Show and tell.
That's what Jetta loves.
Just got this at my the thrift
Le
store at my parents'
Carre.
church. Just a couple. I've had copies of this on and off throughout my life because I
Now, are
love it.
you a avid reader of that writer? Because I've noticed that a lot of people who read him seem to read all of his stuff if they read one.
I mean, I think the Russia House was probably my introduction to Le Carre. The movie, The Russia House, was probably my introduction to Le Carre. I might have
Okay,
read The Spy Who Came in from the Cold before that.
okay, but he mainly writes stories like this that are sort of espionage centric, right?
Very much
Um,
so.
and this one, how would you describe it to somebody who's never seen it or
Yeah,
heard
I
of
would
it?
describe it as this is a bit easier. It's a period piece. It's set at the beginning of the Glasnost period in the Soviet Union before the Soviet not long before the Soviet Union collapsed. So it's very particular to that time and place, and it's a spy story and a love story. And the only really and this is much less of a dilemma than Jesus' Son. Here, the only dilemma is: do we say love story first or spy story first?
And it stars Sean Connery and the gorgeous Michelle Pfeiffer, circa 1990. Oh man, I know. Let's not go there. And then it also has our my man Roy Scheider, who is
I'm
kind of
so I'm
older.
so glad. I really yeah. I'm so glad you said that. I just think that like if you like Roy Scheider, seeing him in
I
this
do.
role is such a treat.
It is because he's so profane. He just curses the whole time. He is it's not exactly, I mean, to me, I don't know if you feel this way, but to me peak Scheider is all that
Yeah,
jazz.
I haven't seen all
Okay.
that jazz, but I mean
Oh,
Peak Scheider.
Andrew.
I know Peak Scheider to me is Jaws. You know,
Jaws. Okay. But I mean also Sorcerer, Marathon Man.
he was
I
very
mean, the
good in that.
guy has been in some bangers and he's just always reliable. I mean, I feel like you can depend on him to deliver no matter what it is. Like, I'm happy to see him appear
Yeah,
in
yeah.
anything. But in this one, it's mainly Sean Connery, and then we also have, I love JT Walsh. I have to mention him, and John Mulaney from the dad from Say Anything. It's just solid. That's what I'm saying. It's a solid cast. So there's a lot of actually things that you love about this. Can you tell me like why this speaks to you on like an aesthetic level? Because it seems like to me it's a sensory thing for you.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I love that dimension of the movie. That it's on the one hand, on the one hand, it's supposed to be a suspense story about spies. You know, the presence of Sean Connery is funny because Sean Connery used to do spy stories. They were called James Bond films, and spying meant like making out, driving fast cars, you know, having speedboat races,
Hmm.
blowing things up. And this is like there's none of that apparatus. It's a spy story in which the spying is about like information transmission and like waiting, lots of waiting and lots of scheming and lots of figuring out how to make sure people don't know what you're really trying to do. And so on the one hand, it's a very cerebral movie, and it's
Yes.
doomed to be cerebral. Maybe that's part of why it's sort of fallen. You know, why I never really quite clicked is because there's nothing very visceral about it. But it has this gorgeous score. by Jerry Goldsmith,
Jerry
like
Goldsmith.
at the peak. Like this guy, he really like pulled out all the stops. And I can't I ca and so that's a sensual thing. So, it's one thing to be like, "Oh, we're gonna have a scene here where they're teaching Sean Connery how to be shadowed and how to shadow others," and, um, and it's basically you're trying to watch someone learn, which you can't actually see. It's like now hasn't been conceived of in cinematic terms for the most part, but you watch Sean Connery walk down a street with this, like, jazzy like bass, this sound on the soundtrack, and that arouses like a certain amount of tension, a certain amount of anticipation, and with this beautiful location shooting, and you have something cinematic happening, and the whole movie is like that. I mean, it is extraordinary that they were able to film where they filmed, and they clearly were like, we're not like we're gonna make sure everybody knows that like we were in Moscow, we were in Leningrad, and they have these amazing
Lisbon.
vistas,
Right.
amazing settings, amazing locations. Um, and that is all sheer pleasure, just as much as getting to see Michelle Pfeiffer's face, in big close-ups. So or hear Sean
And the
Connery's
hair.
voice, which you get to hear
Yeah.
him do a lot of great talking in this movie, and that's delicious. That's always just it's what's a wonderful thing to know that like we want to hear Sean Connery talk. You know.
I would almost compare this, I don't know how you feel about this, but I kept thinking of, like, All the President's Men,
Mm,
like a movie about journalists, because it feels like it's not so much an action movie as people talking through things, trying to figure things out. There's a mystery involved, but then there's also like deception. And then, like, where's this going? How's this going to end up? So I thought a lot about like older films where you're watching like Newsman,
yeah.
or, because there is all that waiting and talking. This is very dialogue heavy. And then it's got Michelle doing a Russian accent too, which I
Her
thought she did
accent
pretty
is
well.
fabulous. I mean, I love listening
Yeah,
to it. Um,
yeah.
I think what you have when I go back to when I think about the book and basically what I love about both of these movies is that they Jesus Son and Russia House both hit this sweet spot where, for one thing, they thread the needle that I believe you could read the book first and then see the movie,
Mhm.
or see the movie first and then read the book, and your pleasure would be undiluted, whichever direction you go.
Mm,
And that the movies serve to give you a really good sense of how good the book would be, um, and yet the book is still its own unique experience. I mean, I've seen adaptations where the movie renders the book obsolete. There's really no need. The novel is just sort of a container for the story, and the movie really did the story better. I'll
mhm.
never tell anyone to go and read Jaws. I mean, that's just nothing. Not to diss Benchley, but like the movie is a superlative work that conveys the story will not be conveyed better. Um, but that's not the same thing at all for these. And that's why I feel so. I feel with the Russia House that Le Carre really did something special because he had pledged himself to tell these spy stories that were going to be like what it was really like as a spy. Like it was based on sort of real research and real of his own experience. His whole thing was to be authentic. But the thing is, he knew that and you see a little bit of it in the movie. He knew that in the late '80s, computers, digital transmission of information was going to absolutely transform the way spying was done. Like it's
Right.
just it, it that was it's like what we're dealing with now with AI. Like he knew that was the sexy stuff. That was the stuff that was going to get everybody's attention. People were going to think of that as authentic, quite soon. That was, the kind of thing he was interested in would just be not relevant. And he contrived a story where basically the spy masters who would like to do things in very automated fashion and in a very impersonal fashion are compelled to use interpersonal interactions to achieve their goals. Like he sets it up so that they're going to have to do old school. You make a contact, you work the contact, you find ways to establish authenticity, not through just hacking, and not just through information flow through digital means, but you actually have to talk to people to get where you want to go. And
Mhm.
the tactility of the notebooks, everything, all of that, I feel like is Le Carre saying, look, I can still be authentic. You have to work with me a little, but like there's still a role in the world for this kind of old fashioned tradecraft. And he sets up a story in which it's necessary, and that's part of the drama of the movie is these guys who want to do business any other way than having to work with Barley, Sean Connery's
Right.
character. um again and again they're like, is this really what we're reduced to? And they're trying to like vet him and figure out like, can he be trusted? And clearly they're just uncomfortable in that very position, and that's Le Carre's great achievement. Is he's like, people matter. We're caught in these huge systems, but people still matter. And so he found a way to tell a story in which that would be part of the drama, is like, well, do people still matter?
It feels like a callback. I mean, I watched this with my parents, and my dad kept saying, "When was this made?" And I was like, 1990, and he was like, "This does not feel that way at all." It's like, again, it reminds me of Hoffman and Redford, like, going door to door, because they have to, like, use the phone book,
Yes, yes.
and,
The phone books and all the
go
President's
to
Men
the
are awesome.
archives.
Like, just that wall of phone, I was like, "Oh
I
my gosh,"
I know,
blows my mind.
I know. Even in this is much later, but like even in Spotlight, with Keaton and McAdams, they're also going door to door, uh because of when it's set. But it is that feeling of like, oh, you it's kind of this instant nostalgia, where you feel like people were in a time where they worked harder, and there was more FaceTime with human beings, like you're saying, and connection. And this, like you said, it's also a love story, so that could have never happened if it had been done in a different way. They would have never met,
Right.
right? I mean,
Even so, I mean, the constraints of the spy story are such that Barley and Katya don't get to spend a lot of time together, and it was only on these watches, getting ready for the show, that I was like, oh, the love story really happens in those like phone conversations. It's and I hadn't
right.
appreciated that the first time I saw it, but like when they're on the phone and they're not performing in a sense for the whole apparatus in the same way,
Mm.
that's where you get that feeling of he's ready to be intimate. It's very funny to me when she's like, you should go if you're getting ready for a journey, you should go sit down. And he's like, I'm lying down. Does that count? I mean, it sounds like a very racy way to have a conversation, but
Right. Well, and even in the delivery of when it's finally like, oh, there's feelings here. It is so funny the way that they decide to sort of drop that information. So but it has this very strong literary quality, which I love, and Jesus' son does too, because of the narration, because
yeah,
he's sort of bringing us along and guiding us that way. And I know McKee in adaptation would say, you know, damn you if you use voiceover narration. It's sloppy, flaccid writing. Uh, I mean, that's Kaufman preaching at himself, but anyway. So there is this sense that's like, is it lazy? But when it's literary like this, I feel like it just adds
yeah,
so
yeah.
much
You
to
get
it.
something so beautiful with this movie because it was adapted by Tom Stoppard. I don't know if you know anything about Tom
Yes,
Stoppard.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead,
Yeah,
right? That's the same.
yeah. Stoppard was born Czech and moved to ended up in England as a
England.
refugee from the Nazis. Was in the movie they have this talk about '68 and Prague in '68. Like that was a huge moment for him. He wrote a bunch of plays, basically very similar stories to the Russia House of like intellectuals and professors trying to deal with the repression of thought in communist Czechoslovakia. So, and Stoppard loves adapting. He loves being a script doctor. For him, he's like, the hard work
Hmm.
is coming up with the story. If somebody has a story and wants me to help with the dialogue, that is just sheer pleasure for me. And I think that's what you feel in this movie. Like Le Carre gives him a lot to work with. A lot of the best lines in the movie are straight from the novel, but the key is like selecting them and ordering them so that they can actually land. And I just think it's so elegantly done as an adaptation. Like you're talking about like his rant against voiceover, like the way
Yes.
the way Stoppard basically figures out a way to start the movie so you're introduced to Barley and Katya at the same time. And the way he does it is opening on a shot in Russia of Katya, but he's jumped ahead on the soundtrack. So we're listening to Barley being interrogated by the gentleman of the Russia house. And so we see Katya and hear Barley at more or less the same time. And he figures out a way to sort of fold the movie on itself to try and do more than one thing at a time. And that's,
Yes.
yeah, that's a very literary quality, but it's pleasurable too. I mean, it's something, it's kind of, it's very cinematic in its own way.
It is, and it helps to make you feel like you're getting this sense of the
Mm.
book as well. I we were just talking about this because this is relevant to what's going on right now, but a bunch of us just watched The Counselor, which is based on a Cormac McCarthy book, but he himself wrote the screenplay. I mean, I can't imagine if somebody else had attempted to, so I'm glad it was McCarthy doing his own stuff. But even that is kind of uh it's a different thing, right? Even if they're adapting themselves,
And so
um
I
it's
understood The
very different.
Counselor as being he just wrote a screenplay. Is
Right.
it adapted from another work?
No, he wrote a book.
Oh,
He wrote the book, and then I mean, now I'm worried about the ordering of this thing. I don't think he wrote the movie and then wrote the book. I'm pretty sure, but he adapted his own novel, didn't he?
I don't know. I
Oh
mean,
my gosh. I'm
there have been
I'm
adaptations
gonna
of
get
Cormac McCarthy
creamed if I'm
novels.
wrong
What
about this.
my recollection from The Counselor was that that was the thing, that like letting McCarthy loose on a screenplay is how you get this like really wild dialogue and like lots of great lines. Like that's my understanding of the movie, is that people do a lot of great talking in that movie.
I'm like 99. Yeah, okay. The Counselor is a book. Yes. I was going to say because I looked this up on Goodreads because I was talking about like I was wanting to quote it straight from there. So yes. But then like I he since he did it himself, there's a different flair there than
Yeah, yeah,
someone else taking it like we're talking about for these two instances. It wasn't the author of the book writing the screenplay. So even so, it's like you're saying where there's certain movies that render the book inconsequential because you're like, well, I've already seen it. I don't need to read it. And then there's some movies that make you want to read
yeah.
it. And I think probably those are the best ones.
Yeah, I'm
And
old fashioned.
yeah,
I still love books, and I love the idea of I love the idea of movies that are, you know, movies that yeah, that lead you to books. I think that's nice. The movie's
I
pleasurable in
agree.
itself, and also there's another richer experience waiting for you if you go ahead and read it.
This is something that I don't know. Have you ever seen the bird with the crystal plumage?
It's been a
The
long time.
giallo?
Yeah,
Giallo. Okay, that was based on a
the
pulp
Screaming
novel.
Mimi.
The Screaming
Love that
Mimi.
title. I love that guy,
That is
Frederick
right.
Brown. I never read any of his novels. He wrote great like short genre stories as part of his career, and I used to love that kind of stuff. So I've read some of his stories.
That stands out to me immensely because when I was writing the review for it, I read the opening paragraph of the book that it was based on, and I mean, the book just sounded phenomenal. Like it
Yeah,
was one of the best openers I'd ever read, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" So yeah, anything that makes you look for something and then want to read it, that feel like they did their job.
yeah.
Speaking of, so I'm going to end our episode with the movie that is. I'll show this book each time, even though there's probably people doing audio. The best film you've never seen is the book that I'm going through for this series. The one that I am covering today is Ryan Johnson's Hidden Gem. Ryan, my man from well, The Last Jedi, but he's also more of an indie filmmaker like Looper and Brick, Knives Out now. So he's kind of going a little bit more blockbustery. But his hidden gem was Under the Volcano,
Mm, I've never seen that,
directed by John Huston.
but
Yeah.
I get a classic
Uh
example of like someone adapting a novel that was supposedly unadaptable.
Malcolm
Mm,
Lowry. Mm-hmm. And kind of like Inherent Vice, actually, uh, by Pynchon. That was like an unadaptable film that somehow PTA managed to wrangle. Um, and then, yeah, Under the Volcano is the hidden gem of the week. That is Albert Finney in a powerhouse
mm.
performance.
I can only
about
imagine.
an alcoholic in Mexico on the Day of the Dead. It's just a 24-hour film. Um, but that's also I was like, I've got to do a film in this list that was actually based on a book since Andrew had picked two that were. And these are movies that you love: Jesus' Son and Russia
Mm.
House.
Now I hadn't seen. I don't think I had seen Jesus Son since '99. But I just knew. I always knew it was just close. It was always sort of close to my heart. And whereas the Russia House I've watched and rewatched many many times.
Yeah, and that one your review was very personal that you had watched it with your
Yeah,
daughter and
yeah.
kind of showed it
When
to
Le Carre
her.
died. Yeah,
Right. And I think my buddy Shaw also did that too because he's a reader of the novels as well and had like commented that so that's also kind of an interesting thing that they put Sean Connery in it since he was Bond. Much older here though.
yeah, yeah.
Not really
Did
young.
you
So,
did you buy him? Did you enjoy Connery
did
in
I
the movie?
buy I did. I felt like he was kind of a rogue, like a free thinker, rebellious, like he an idealist really, like who was trying to go against the system but also really supported it. Do you feel like that?
Yeah, for me, a very important part of the way these I relate to these movies has to do with the beginning of the '90s and the end of the '90s. So at the beginning of the '90s, I was
Mm.
20 and I was at a loss. I felt like somebody who had been handed a lot of really sophisticated tools and really had no idea what to do with any of them. So the idea of Barley as this guy who had family money behind him, he's in the family business, doesn't really want to do anything in particular with it. He mostly wants to get drunk, hang out in Russia, with his Russian friends. Like he has a sense of himself as just not it's kind of a waste of time. He's not he's still charming. He's not morose about it, but one of the things he says I love. He says you shouldn't use me. I let people down. This is his experience. So the arc in the Russia House that means so much to me is this guy who's like, maybe I'm not a loser. Maybe I actually have the skills to make something happen in the teeth of these enormous systems, these enormous obstacles that are in my way. Where he finds himself as like, I have got to find a way through this for Katya. That's the dream, that when the chips are down, you'll find out who you are. When the chips are down, you're going to find out that you are capable of heroic action. You know, um, and then it's classic to me that 10 years later, what I really needed was a movie like Jesus' Son, which is sort of like you are a leaf in a whirlwind. The world is surreal and terrifying, and you have to accept that you are an odyssey not fully of your own making, and you're hoping for a breath of grace, to come from somewhere. And in the meantime, you just got to see what's coming next. And like FH, I don't really know what's coming next. That's where I was at those 2 points in time. Um, Anyway,
Mm.
so with that arc in the Russia House makes me I want to know, did you buy, because I don't know if Connery does a very good job of this, did you buy it that Barley didn't really like himself? Did you buy it that Barley kind of felt like or is it more Connery saying the lines, but I don't know if Connery projects that kind of weariness.
I felt like he was lost and that what he was attracted to
Mm,
in Michelle Pfeiffer was
mm,
conviction, her conviction. And he says a line that I quoted it when I reviewed it briefly, which is "You're my country
mm,
now." So it's that sense of like and I feel this is a parallel to Jesus' son when he goes to rehab. Uh, there's a sense that we are all waiting for someone or something to enter our life where we can say, "Now I know myself.
yeah,
This external thing makes me feel worthwhile. It's something that I can put my passion into and therefore be useful and have that sense of purposefulness." So in both instances, I think that happens. It's in the form of the love that he has for her. And then in Jesus' son, to me, the scene is like when he says that the sick
Mm.
people are complete messes and they are so sick, they need so much help that they're unable, like the rest of us, to pretend that they don't need help. It just it just comes out of them. And so I think that that's a very powerful image of like we all need these things. We pretend like we don't. And wouldn't it be almost better to just admit it and then be able to receive it when it comes? But yes, I think you're right that we're all kind of waiting for that.
It's a beautiful connection.
And both of those movies have that, Andrew.
Mm.
Now that I'm thinking about it and reflecting, I think they're both like these people are a little bit aimless and reactive to the events around them, where people are kind of in control and they're sort of drifting along, but they are attracted to, okay, here's where I fit.
Um, can I tell you one more bit?
Oh, go. Sure.
So, one of, what one of the things I love about the Russia House is Le Carre still does believe it's not really the same as Jesus' Son. Jesus' Son is profoundly about powerlessness. In the Russia House, Barley is relatively powerless in terms of he's dealing with these huge systems that have him in their grip. But when he figures out how to navigate those systems, he finds a source of actual power. And I don't we don't do spoilers, so I won't say more about that. But Le Carre, that was really where his head was. Like when Gorbachev was leading the Soviet Union and things were changing, he really believed that if America and the West could stop being in this defensive posture and try to support what they were doing, that we could turn things around. And then if we didn't, we would regret it. Now, what's wild to me is that when they started shooting the Russia House, the Berlin Wall was up, and when they were done shooting it, the Berlin Wall was down. So while
Wow.
they were shooting the Russia House, there was this KGB officer in East Germany who was like trying to like stay alive as mobs were raiding and tearing down the KGB and the secret police buildings in East Germany. And they were like radioing Moscow, like, can we defend ourselves? And Gorbachev declined to invite them to make it violent. He said, so they had to end up just burning all their files and just and escape. And that KGB officer was Vladimir Putin.
Wow.
So Le Carre was
Wow.
he really saw something. He was like, if we don't handle this right and enter into like a more collaborative exchange with the Soviets, we're laying the groundwork for worse oppression in the future.
Right.
So
Kind of almost reminds me of the Lives of Others movie where you get this snapshot of that of how that must have felt like at the time and then after. But continue,
no,
yeah.
just that for Le Carre, I mean, I think Dennis Johnson, the writer of Jesus' Son, the book comes from an experience of having been profoundly stripped down, by addiction and having been profoundly powerless. And Le Carre he really wants to leave us with a sense that you can make a difference. And that's just it's a difference in tone. I mean, I still say that like we're still talking about finding the grace to sort of be ourselves in the midst of these, contending forces. But but that stress that Le Carre puts on Barley made a difference, and then the movie makes it really blunt. The novel elegantly is like leaves it ambiguous, but in the movie they're like, we want you to know that how it turned out.
Yes, and it's kind of the uh Horton hears a who aesthetic. Like a person's a person no matter how small, that
Yeah.
you all of us are in sort of immediate environments and surroundings, and there's only so much you can do, but you can do something. And you don't have to necessarily wait for, the Americans to knock on your door and ask you to spy, but at the same time, sometimes life is like that, and it's kind of comforting in a
Hmm.
way, I think, at the end of the day for both of these films. So, yes. getting deep with Andrew Draper. Deep Thoughts with Andrew. Check these out, please. They're great. Jesus' Son and The Russia House. I hope that we have presented a very good case for these delightful hidden gems. Thank you
It
again,
was a pleasure.
Andrew,
Thank you so
for
much for
stopping
having me.
by. Yes, and we'll see you at the movies.